People who have had sex with their significant other or ex or friend's parent. How did you get to that point? What happened after? Story 1. A friend's mom, going through some tough times with her husband, accidentally added one of our friends on Facebook. She started flirting with him and eventually they fucked. After this continued for a couple of months, the dude decided to tell his friend, son, about it at his house. The son cried, threw hands at each other, and everything was all right moments later. I don't know what happened after that. I lost contact with them. Story 2. My brother's best friend from high school dated my mom in his 30s. She had my brother young when she was barely 15, so when his friend was in his 30s, she wasn't 50 yet. I will never forget the night he found out. They fought, and my brother's friend left the house and got into his car. My brother followed him out and punched him in the head through the driver's window. He managed to go through the window and connect with enough force to knock him out cold. Story 3. Back in my late 20s, I had a friend in a small mountain town in the western U.S. His mom gets separated and moves in with him. She's mildly flirtatious with me, no big deal. Not enough to raise any red flags. Job changes and I move to the city 90 miles south. He comes on the weekends to party a few times. Then he comes to the party and brings her. At her request, we have a late night fuckfest while he's passed out in the next room. Major violation of the bro code by me, but she asked nicely. No surprise we weren't friends after that. Story 4. A good friend of mine had this happen to her back in high school. She caught her, also high school-age boyfriend, sexting her 40-something-year-old mother, leading to her mom and stepdad's divorce. All while she was 17 years old. She still has a strained relationship with her mom to this day. We're 25 now, so this happened almost 10 years ago. I don't think you can ever get over that kind of betrayal by your mother. On the other hand, she has a good relationship with her now ex-stepdad. Her mom is now dating a man her age, but she will always be a predator in my eyes that seduces her daughter's boyfriend. Story 5. One of my first girlfriends in high school's mom used to tell her that she would give me her virginity seriously. Often. Then mom started flirting with me. One day while at their house, mom grabbed me in the hallway and kissed me. After we split up, mom used to call me still now and then. Once asked if I wanted to come over and hang out. So I did, and mom got my virginity. Story 6. My first serious girlfriend's mom used to text me every day after her daughter and I broke up. Just friendly stuff at first. Then talking about music and other mutual interests. I used her to keep tabs on what my ex was doing because I was a dumb 16-year-old kid. Eventually, it led to her telling me how much I reminded her of her high school boyfriend who killed himself. And she told me she had lost her virginity to him and how much she'd loved him. Then things took a turn. She started sending sexual texts, which turned into nudes and phone sex, and planned to hook up. Eventually, I ended up walking away from it all before anything happened. I didn't think of it much back then, but looking back at it now, I was a 16-year-old heartbroken boy, and she was a 40-year-old married woman. So that's pretty fucked up to think about now. Groomed and taken advantage of by someone I thought was my friend. Story 7. I slept with my friend's mother at a music fest and was high on acid. We were all hanging out, me, my two friends who were dating, we'll call David and Claire's mother. Claire doesn't feel too hot, so David takes her back to the campsite, and her mother and I are just leaving for the festival. We get some drinks in, do some dancing, and one thing leads to another. And yeah, so afterward, we chilled in my tent for a few hours before hitting the party tent and having a wee cuddle. Claire walked in on us after we had finished, and I was so high I didn't even really know what was happening. I just knew I had done something very wrong. So the festival ends and we all go home, and of course, the sensible thing to do would have been to try and patch things up with Claire and never talk to her mother again. You will find, however, that I am not a sensible man, and I proceeded to not only see her again, but date her on and off for 4 years. I have so many stories about those 4 years. Story 8. I hooked up with my student's mom. I was teaching an after-school program, so I saw her almost every week at pickup. Sometimes her husband would pick up. Yes, she was married. And we would talk a lot to the point that we became friendly. Well, I was going through a divorce and happened to bring that up one time, and she very quickly gave me her phone number and put her hands on me. She was not shy about it, something like out of a movie. The next time I saw her, she asked me for lunch, and I said sure. We met up, had lunch, she paid, and she went on to tell me about how she and her husband were not sexually involved with each other, and they were free to see other people. We went back to my place, and the sex was wild. That was the one time we hooked up, though, as I started dating someone shortly after. Her kid was one of those, I'll fuck your mom Xbox Live kids, so I would chuckle when I saw him. Story 9. I had sex with one of my best friend's moms. It was Thanksgiving, and I was driving her back home, and she confessed that she didn't have sex in years since she was a widow. I told her that I didn't have sex in months since I was moving. So we talked a bit more and flirted once we got to her house. She asked me to come inside, and we did the deed. Story 10. My mom had a friend, and I was friends with her son. I turned 16 in November and went to their house for a Christmas party. I got drunk and passed out on the couch in the living room. I woke up to the house empty, apart from my friend's mom sucking my dick. That turned into a relationship for about 18 months. One afternoon, my mom was telling me how shit I was and how none of my friends could be trusted. So I asked her if she could trust all her friends. When she said yeah, I asked, even Margaret? And then the truth came out. Most of the facts, anyway. I never spoke to my friend again, but I did have to fight some drug dealer friends of his. Margaret came around to my mom's house the day after and got a mouthful of abuse. I don't know what was said, but I'll guarantee that it was more about the breach of trust between her and my mom and less about the sexual assault. My mom has never really forgiven me for it. Story 11. One of my childhood friends was raped by an older boy when she was 12. He was in her bedroom because she'd let him in. That doesn't excuse or justify anything. I have an abiding memory of her mom screaming that it wouldn't have happened if she wasn't a little slag who let boys into her room. That friend is now an alcoholic and drug addict who's never been able to see how amazing she is. Instead, she had a string of scummy and abusive boyfriends who didn't deserve her. Sadly, blaming victims for the awful things that are done to them is all too common. Story 12. I had sex with a good friend's mom. Looking back, it's messed up. She had been working on me for months. I was only 18. I'm ashamed of it. Fortunately, the friend never found out, but as an adult, I now look back at it and realize that I was in over my head and she should have known better. Story 13. My sister was talking to this one kid I didn't care for, and I ended up working with him at a job I was managing. A woman is working in a different area at the same job. I ended up having a one-night stand with her after flirting a bit here and there. Come to find out later that was the dude's mom. My sister would then use this as a comeback and say, well, your mom sucked off my bro. Several years ago, it was a weird time. We all moved away after a bit. Nothing much outside of that happened. Story 14. I worked with them in college. We worked late shifts together and had sex multiple times in my dorm. She didn't know her mother worked day shift and had a married last name that she kept. So I later, like 1.5 years later, went on to perform the day shift, not knowing that it was her mother, and they were aged 18 and 34, so I never thought it could have been. She also made sure not to tell me it was her mom because she said that conversation would be awkward. So yeah, I end up sleeping with her mom and her. Neither of them, to my knowledge, knew that I slept with the other, and I wasn't willing to tell them. I haven't seen either of them in years, by the way. I graduated and moved, and for those wondering, the mom was better.